Hi, it's Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. This is a super simple technique that I had so much fun with. It is not a new technique, it's just new to me. And we are going to be doing some ink swiping. So I have some Reinkers here, which I'm going to use. I'm also going to show you how to use some ink pads, if that's all you have to do this technique. And the way that I'm going to do it today is just one way to do it. There are lots of different ways out there. So you can either pop the ink down first of all on your paper and then swipe across. I'm just using an old plastic, this is an ear points card, but you know, like any old plastic gift card or credit cards or anything like that works really well. I've also seen people just use some normal cardstock. I've seen people use little rulers. If you just have an ink pad like this one, all you have to do is just swipe a little bit of ink and you can see that it's sitting there ready to go on my little plastic card. So I am just simply swiping it across the page. And yes, it does look kind of messy, and I generally like things kind of neat, but I promise that this will all come together when we make these into cards. So this technique is so fun. You can go ahead and just go for gold with whatever you have. This is some Spun Sugar Distress Oxide inks, and this time I'm putting it directly onto the back of the plastic card. Either works very similar. You can do whatever you feel more comfortable with or whatever you have more control. This is some Spiced Marmalade Distress Oxide, so a nice orange ink. You do want to try and have colours that are going to not create mud, and if you think that they might, then definitely let them dry in between, but have a play, because sometimes you get super surprised with the results and it's not quite what you were expecting. So here I felt like the pink was a little bit too light, so I'm going to use some Worn Lipstick Distress Oxide Reinker. I did use the ink pads, the Oxide ink pads, sorry, and they worked perfectly fine, just the same as I kind of scraped gently along the top of the VersaFine Clair ink pads. It all works really similar, so just whatever you have. I have also seen this technique done with paint, and that works really well. Yeah, it was just really fun to have it a go because I haven't done this before. Now I'm going in with some Twisted Citron, and I want quite a good base layer here. So I'm definitely covering up most little spots. Then I'm going to come in with some Peacock feathers, which is just a medium kind of blue, and fill in a few more spots. The one good thing about the Oxides is that they do layer up very nicely. However, I found that putting Oxides and Pigment inks together, or Oxides and dye inks, they all worked really well and they all layered up really nicely. So it's just whatever you have on hand to have a play with. And yeah, I was just sort of, didn't want to go too far with these. You could definitely add more layers. I tend to stick to 2 or 3 ink layers, but you could add more or less and just have a play, as I said. These pieces of paper here are 4 1/4 by 8 or so inches, just because I was having a play and I knew that I would be die cutting out of them. So I could kind of just pick the piece that I wanted and die cut that out. Now moving on to some blueprint sketch. I really like this one, the pinks, the greys and the blues. Yeah, I just had a really nice time playing and seeing what I liked. So I did maybe about 8 or 10 of these, but I kind of just picked the first 4 that I did here on camera, and I'm going to show you guys what they look like. Now I know they kind of don't look like too much as is, but I thought that the end result of the card was pretty cool. So in a second I will pause the video and you can kind of get a bit of a look at the 4 that I created just here, first of all on camera. And as I said, I went ahead and created some more off camera afterward. But I'm going to go ahead and use this kind of pinky orangey one. I did want to fill in a few more of the white spots because I knew what I wanted to add on top. So I am kind of making sure that I go along and even out and fill in some of the little gaps where there's a little too much. I didn't want to get rid of all of the white because I think that definitely adds to it. So I just added a tiny little bit here and there, and then I'm all done. With this from here, I need to let it dry, or you can dry it with your heat gun, either. Then I'm going to cut this up. Now you could either use your trimmer to trim a shape out, or you can use some dies, and in this case I'm going to go ahead and use the Hero Arts Infinity rectangle die set. Now that was the biggest one that I just showed you there, but I changed my mind and went a little bit smaller because I want there to be a nice white border on my card. So for this one I did end up taking it right out of the middle, and I'm not worried about that because I use the side scraps to die cut out sentiments and words and things when I want to stack them up. So I'm not worried about the waste either side of it. Now I'm just showing you what you can do here. This is just options. I'm going to add a little bit of white delusions paint, which is just a white acrylic paint. Add a little bit of water so that I dilute it down, and I'm going to add some flicks on this because this will go with the other things that I'm going to add on the front of the card. So I did want there to be that kind of white element coming through as well. I didn't want to get rid of it all together. Once that is all nice and dry, I am going to do some die cutting. I have no stamping on this card, but I do have these die cuts, and I have cut that one out of some nice thick cardstock. Then I have this friend die set here, which actually came in a packet of Slimline dies. This was designed by Nicole Silhouette, and I have die cut out that friend die lots of times, 4 times, and I actually put stickit adhesive on the back of all of these so that it made my life super easy. Sometimes I'm feeling lazy like that and it makes life easier, but using liquid glue is just as good and enables you to kind of wiggle them around and line them all up perfectly. Using stickit adhesive is also really good because it doesn't become permanent, and you can kind of pull it back and readjust it several times until you press down really hard, and that will make the adhesive permanent. So I've got a nice thick friend sentiment there ready to go. Now with this gorgeous big flower die here, I'm actually going to trim it down a little bit because I want to use another bit down the bottom further. And I know that this part will be hanging off the edge already, so it will be cut off as well. So I am going to pull off the stickit adhesive backing from that friend die and just stick that down. Now I actually may have tricked you earlier on when I said there was no stamping on this card because I have just remembered that I did do some stamping, but just a little bit. I have put stickit adhesive on the back of this really intricate die as well. Again, this makes life easier, but if you have liquid glue, then using a little makeup sponge and some liquid glue on the back would work just perfectly as well. As I said, with this stickit adhesive, you are able to kind of move it around a little bit and adjust it, and then when you press down nice and hard, it becomes permanent. So that's why I really like the stickit adhesive. Then the little leaves that I cut off earlier on, I am just going to add those down the bottom. Here is the little sentiment that I did for you, my friend. And I stamped this using the All the Little Things stamp set, my favorite one that I've been using recently. I did have to do some creative stamping to get the my because there was no my word. I just used an M and a Y and stamped them separately side by side and masking off the one letter. And then I'm just going to pull off the stickit adhesive from the back of the leaves and pop that down as well down the bottom. Then once I've got everything in place and where I need it to be stuck down perfectly, I am going to turn the pattern over and cut off all of those overhanging pieces because I don't need those poking out the sides. And then from there, I'm going to put this onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base. I'm going to pop it on using some liquid glue. This is the Reinker Multi-Medium in the matte finish. And I just pop it in these wee glue bottles, which I have a video on my channel if you are struggling to make that happen without having glue go everywhere. I am going to add some glossy accents onto the big friend sentiment, and that will really create this lovely, almost dimensional shine to that sentiment, which is a really nice finishing touch on this card. Apart from that, this card is pretty much done for today. I hope you guys give the ink swiping technique a go. It is so much fun and definitely one technique that you'll get addicted to. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!